Welcome to the Writers of Meaning interview series. Joining me tonight is Dan Veeneman, the author of the Banner's article on the history of estuary. The Banner and Dan kindly gave us permission to reprint their article in the Writers of Meaning Anthology. Welcome, Dan. Thank you for contributing to the Anthology project and being willing to be interviewed.
Yeah, good. Thanks for having me, for sure.
Thank you. Well, let me ask you a question here. Let me get my little thing up here. The first one, maybe you could share a little bit about yourself. Maybe you'd be kind enough to share a little about yourself and your background for our audience.
Yeah, so my name's Dan Veeneman. I currently live in Abbotsford, British Columbia, which is about an hour east of Vancouver. So just kind of north of Seattle, I guess, for those of you in the States. Yeah, I live here with my wife and 3 kids. Kids are 8, 9, and 11. Yeah, and so that's a little bit about me, I guess.
Cool. Well, in your bio, I'm looking at my notes here. It says that you're a ventilation expert for the dairy farms, which sounds like a very interesting exotic occupation to me. I imagine you probably picked up a collection of stories through the years. Would you mind sharing a few of them with us?
Yeah, so I'll just sort of explain a little bit about my job title because it's probably a little bit, not many people probably understand what that is. But so I work in the dairy industry, and one of the things with dairy cows is that they can suffer quite severely from heat stress. So if they get too hot, they have a lot of problems sort of come along with that. So where I come in is I help dairy farmers and producers design ventilation systems to keep their cows cool, keep their barns fresh. And then the company that I work for operates on a global level. So I've worked with farms, all across Canada, the US, and then also all across Asia, the Middle East, Europe, kind of all over. So one of the things that I find very interesting is that in the Western world, like Canada, the US, and Europe, sort of larger scale dairy farming has been happening for quite a long time now. So we're fairly good at it and kind of know what we're doing. But in many of the countries in the developing world, that's not the case. So there's a lot of knowledge that is just sort of lacking or missing that they haven't sort of had the chance to develop on their own. So that's part of it. And the other part that's quite that I find interesting anyways is when I travel, I'm a fairly large guy. I'm 6'6", probably, so 250 to 300 pounds. So I'm a fairly big dude. And so when you travel to Southeast Asia, my size always gets comments and gets people looking at me and whatever. So that's always a fun part of traveling for work. So, and a lot of the developing world wasn't built for people my size. So, whether it's taxi cabs or hotel rooms or kind of all those things are a little tough sometimes, but we make do.
I'm kind of taller. I'm like 5'9", and I have long legs, and so I accidentally tripped the teacher sitting in the front rows because I'm nearsighted and I had to sit up front. So I'm like, ah! And so it's like there's sometimes when being tall is great because you can reach the top shelf, but it's always but when you're in like a airplane seat or a small back seat of a car, you're like, oh, this is not so great. But yeah, I can kind of sympathize with you. Let's see what my notes say here. As you can tell, I am not used to being in front of the screen. Was traveling at all, which is fascinating. You probably picked up quite a few stories of like the writer, you're always looking for fresh material.
Yeah, for sure.
And I was curious, like, before we go into the writing, maybe we can touch base on, like, what was your history with the Banner? Maybe you can explain for our audience who are not familiar, who happen not to be part of the project, what the Banner is and how you found out about them before you started writing for them.
Yeah, so the Banner is a publication of the Christian Reformed Church of North America. Um, so it's published in Canada and the U.S. By the denomination, and so it's mostly sort of church related stuff. So whether I do a lot of news type stuff for them, but they've also got some commentary stuff. They've got just all kinds of sort of church and denomination related stuff that they publish. It's published. There's a physical print version that's published monthly, but online they sort of publish content on a weekly basis.
Mhm.
And there's a handful of sort of paid, writers and staff, and then there's a bunch of us like myself. I'm kind of a freelance journalist for them, I guess. So I'm find sort of interesting things and write about them and send them in, and they publish them or
Cool.
not, kind of idea. So yeah, it's quite fun. I've been writing for them on and off, like I said, on a freelance basis, I think for about 5 or 6 years now. Like I said, mostly news type stuff. I've written some other pieces as well for them. But yeah.
Cool. How did you start writing for them? What was the story behind that?
So the first one, I think one of the first ones I did is there was a youth conference that our church was hosting, and it was a youth conference, and it was I think there was about 7 or 8 local churches from our denomination, all sort of came together, all across from probably, I want to say, probably about within a 2 or 3 hour drive. There's about 7 or 8 churches from our denomination. They all kind of came together and had a big youth conference for a weekend. And so I kind of said, hey, this is something that is quite cool and interesting. So maybe there's other people that are interested in hearing about it. So I sent an email to the editor, and kind of said, hey, this is what's going on. Do you guys, it'd be interesting to get some coverage on this. I said, hey, we don't have a writer in the area. Do you want to do it? Okay, sure, I guess. And so that's kind of where it started.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
yeah, and it's quite funny because in school I didn't enjoy English class very much. Um, yeah, it's something that I kind of started to enjoy doing. I also write fairly regularly for a couple different of agricultural and dairy magazines as well.
Cool.
So I write some stuff for them as well, sort of about ventilation and some of the other things. So yeah, I've kind of started enjoying it more and more as life goes on. So
Cool. Well, that's interesting. So you more from a you come from an agricultural background and
yeah,
and local church, and they just like you know let's have you go on board. That's fantastic.
yeah,
And I've been to their website. It's very beautiful. They have a lot of pieces that are like more they're deeper. They're not the
yes,
surface level stuff, which
yeah,
is kind of refreshing in a way.
yeah,
Like it's not clickbait,
yeah, yeah.
and it's like, oh, let's talk about this hard, interesting topic. So that's really very classy of them. What are some of your favorite pieces that you've written topic wise? Maybe the
Um,
first piece you wrote and something else.
yeah. So
And
one
it could
of
be
my
Banner or it could be any of the other publications that you
Yeah,
wrote
so one
for.
of the pieces that I wrote for the Banner that I've got a lot of feedback on was on the idea of mirrors and binoculars. Um, and the idea sort of being that when we are reading our Bible, we can sort of use it in 2 ways. You can use it like a pair of binoculars, um, meaning that you're always focused on something exterior. Or you can use it like a mirror and you can use it to sort of see what's going on inside yourself. And so when you look at sort of how you use your Bible, or using it like a mirror or a pair of binoculars.
Mm.
Um, I've also got one of the things that I'm really enjoying is my son. He's 9, but he's full of questions all the time. Like it's
Mhm.
every time you sit down at dinner, it's a game of 20 questions sort of thing, right? And a lot of his questions sometimes they kind of spur me to some sort of deeper thoughts and things like that. And so I've got a piece I think that's being published in April for the Banner, but it was him and I are sitting on the floor, building Lego, And through our conversations, you start to realize that you've got this giant pile of pieces of Lego sitting on the floor, all different colors, shapes, and sizes, and whatever. Um, but yet they all sort of have this part to play in whatever you're building,
Mm.
right? And so you can kind of look at that, as the same thing. In the piece that I wrote, I kind of said, compared that to the unity that we have in church, and how there's all these people, different gifts, different talents. Everybody's kind of all different, but
Mm.
everybody has a piece to play, and if there's pieces missing, then it's not complete, right?
Mm.
You can't finish your piece without all the parts sort of playing their role, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
so this is very interesting. Yeah, he asks just all these questions, and it always kind of
Oh,
spurs me to weird and wonderful things. So
sweet. That's awesome.
yeah,
Yeah. Um, Let me check my notes here real quick. I think we were kind of
I mean,
covering some of my
yeah.
questions.
I mean,
That's fantastic, though.
one of the other ones I wrote a while ago was on church missions,
Oh,
and so I was able to go, I think in 2018-ish, I was able to go to Haiti. Actually, my work sent me to Haiti. My work was sponsoring a village, and some building a school in a village. And so some of us employees got to go and sort of see the project and whatever.
cool.
And so one of the things that I wrote about is, what's the goal of sort of some of these organizations. And you look at Haiti as an example. I mean, they're in the news recently because the country's basically falling apart.
Yeah.
Yet as a country, they're the biggest receiver of foreign aid in the world,
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Oh,
right? And so it's like, well, what have we done? Are we helping Haiti to actually help them, or are we helping them because it makes us feel good,
mm,
right? Is it,
yeah.
because if we're helping them to actually help them, then we've done an absolutely terrible job, right? Because they almost are worse off, now than they've ever been,
Mm.
right? And it's like there's the word evangelitourism. I don't know if you ever heard of, like,
No.
no. Okay, so it's where churches will send these teams of young adults to weird and exotic locations, as a missions trip, but it costs them $10,000 each because they got to fly there and do all this stuff. And it's like, well, if we're going there to help, if our goal is to help people, then let's just send them the money. you know like, if we're going to help people, then it's way more beneficial. We can help them more if we just send them money and the stuff, right?
Mm.
Instead of paying to go there. But
Right.
if our objective is to have a learning experience for ourselves, and it's team bonding and sort of all of those things, if those are objectives, then that's a different conversation, right?
Mm.
So it's a matter of, like, what are we actually trying to achieve, and then are we actually achieving that or not, right? So
Right.
yeah,
I know there's some people who say that, you know, some, like Paul Vanderklay, he actually had, I think he went to the Dominion Republic, if I
yeah,
remember right. Um, and there was a lot of mission work down there, and he had like 2 children down there and stuff. And sometimes the missionaries learned a lot from the people there
yes, for sure.
because they're like, you know, dealing with the situation and stuff, and it's kind of eye opening, and breaks cultural barriers and that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And sometimes it's like we we throw money at stuff and it doesn't change anything, like you're saying. And what really needs to happen is a change of heart, or a change of how things are operated. Even with ourselves.
yeah,
We want to, like, get up in the morning. Like, we need the alarm, but we need to go to work or something like that. And sometimes it's like, I don't want to do it. We have those kind of things. So those personal things that keep us from improving ourselves. We read lots
yeah,
of self-help books that makes us feel like we're doing something.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, but yeah, some really good thoughts on that. Um, uh, let's see. So it sounds like you've been incorporating a lot of your journeys and your traveling and your journeys and your life experience and your interaction with your children into your writing. But from your perspective, what has your writing journey been like? You said you started in elementary school or school not really liking English, and then somehow because of the opportunity with the banner or other opportunities.
Yeah. I mean,
Um,
even in like even I want to say even in college, I started to enjoy writing. I always it was quite funny when we were in college. My wife and I were in a bunch of the same classes, and so she would know exactly what papers I had due and what stuff I had due, and so she was always very diligent in working on all of her assignments, and I'd be hanging out with the other kids in the dorms and not doing a whole lot, and I figured out fairly quickly that hey, if I could pound out a paper in a night, and it's not so bad, and it sounds pretty good, and it reads pretty good, and it's pretty decent, and she had to she had to work at that kind of stuff a lot harder than I did.
mm,
Um, and so then yeah, so I started sort of enjoying it just because it was it came relatively easy. Um,
cool.
yeah, and then I'm very, I don't know what the right word is, thoughtful, introspective person. So there's always thoughts and ideas sort of percolating in my head. And so sometimes it's just nice to put them down on paper, and sometimes they turn into something, and sometimes it's a lot of nothing. But I
Yeah,
find sometimes that can be a little bit helpful just to sort of take the ideas from my head and put them on paper somewhere. So
yeah. I have a funny way of like I tend to say the last thing first, and then I realize that I'm doing it wrong. And so in writing, I can cheat, and I can go, "Oh, I'm supposed to say all this other stuff before I said that thing." And for me, it's been the writing process is kind of like helping me to figure out to think clearer.
mm.
Um, so I'm more intuitive, and so I'm like I think of stuff, and then usually what gets a good piece out of me is like something gets me upset. And I'm like, ah. But it sounds like you have lots of good food for thought.
Yeah, yeah. There's
That's what
lots of
the
stuff. Yeah.
uh, so. Um, what are some things that are like core? This is a question out of the blue here for you. Um, what do you tend to gravitate towards more in writing? Is it the agricultural thing, or the introspective stuff, or it's like
Um,
whatever's brewing in your mind, or
yeah, yeah. So I actually really like writing for the banner, kind of doing some of the news stuff,
hmm,
because there's lots of cool things that I've kind of heard about. Um, like I think back to a story that I did. There's a group in the Midwest somewhere. I can't remember now where they're at. But what they do is they work with a lot of the immigrant community. There's a large, I think it was like a meat processing plant in the community, and
hmm,
so they would bring in a lot of foreign workers to work at this plant. And so
uh-huh,
this organization, what they do is they actually go and assist these people in, you know, um, getting driver's license, getting them English classes, kind of doing all these kind of things. They actually,
cool,
yeah, yeah, do driver's school with them and just sort of do all these things with them to sort of help them, in their journey to becoming, permanent residents and citizens. Um, there was another one. There was a church in northern Washington, I think in Linden, Washington. And for a number of years, they did Stations of the Cross, but they did it at different stations all around their downtown core.
huh,
So they would kind of have different people from their church standing at different stations, and they have kind of these billboards or posters or whatever at these different stations, and someone from the church would sort of walk them through the different stations of the cross, and they kind of did this all through their downtown core. So yeah, it's just very interesting, some of the cool things that some of these churches are up to, and so yeah.
Cool. Forgive me for my ignorance, but what do you mean by downtown core? My
Oh,
hearing,
just
I have a hearing loss, so I don't always hear
yeah. So
everything
just like
properly.
their downtown business district, right? So
Oh, okay.
yeah, yeah.
Cool. Let's see. Go back to my cheat sheet here. So out of curiosity, most of the people who are probably going to read this, watch this or listen to it, will probably be from our little corner of the internet, which is a meeting community that Paul friend started and all that kind of stuff. But I'm kind of curious for my own sake, and I think other people would find it curious in our community. What was it like for you seeing it from the outside as someone totally unfamiliar with all our stuff about Peterson and the estuary and all that kind of stuff? What was it like for you to actually like find out about it, and how did you find out about it? Did you find it and then write the piece and give it to? How did that all work out?
No. So one of our editors came across, um, somehow it came across her. It was in. It came up at one of the meetings at some point. I think there was a meeting of the regional churches in California, and there was a note in there about estuary or about something like that. And so she said, "Hey, what's this?" Because she often reads, she tries to keep up with the happenings of the different kind of regional groups, because sometimes there's stuff going on that she wants to write about. And she said, "Oh, what's this?" And so she kind of looked into it. She said, "Hey, this is kind of interesting." And so then she kind of threw it at me because I'm on the West Coast. Said, "Hey, why don't you look into this and see what this is, and if it's worth writing about, then go ahead and see what the deal is." So that was kind of my introduction to estuary. And so it was actually just before, kind of right around the conference, actually, that I started talking with Paul and with
John Fenton?
John. Yeah, there you go, John. Yeah, so I started talking with Paul and John, sort of just before the conference last year.
The Chino conference.
Yeah,
There's been multiple ones in Europe and
the
United States.
Before the Chino one. Yeah, before the Chino one. Yeah, so I started talking with them then, and yeah, I mean, I found that the concept very interesting, because one of the things, being sort of very introspective and sort of often, in my own thoughts, there's lots of questions and things that there's not always a place to ask them.
Yeah.
So I found that to be very appealing, right? And I also, I found that to be very, very appealing, that kind of a safe place to ask questions. And and one of the things that I've discovered too, that as I have traveled a lot, whether for work or otherwise, I've just always, where was I going with this? Yeah, just the sort of cross-cultural thing, and that everybody's kind of got their own perspective on things, right? And so oftentimes it's easy to get sort of stuck in what I call a Christian bubble. Growing up, I went to a church, and then the church kind of had a school associated with it. So I was very, the people I saw on Monday to Friday, I also saw them Sunday, right? So it was very much kind of this Christian bubble, so to speak, right? And so when you can get outside of that and have different perspectives and different ways of looking at things, I think that's very important, and it sort of broadens your worldview quite a bit when you can do that. So
yeah, cool. So this is probably going to sound weird coming from another writer, but I'm not really a journalist. So how did you kind of write the news stories for the Banner and also for Estuary? How do you compile the information? Do you just like interview people, transcribe it?
So I did. I had I had a phone call with John Van Dog first.
Okay.
He was kind of the first one that I talked to. Um, so I chatted on the phone with him for about an hour, and turns out we knows some of the same people, and
Cool.
he grew up in the agriculture industry a little bit. So yeah, we had a great conversation, and then and then I had a separate video conversation with him and Paul. Um, that was a post conference. I think we had a video call with him and Paul. So yeah, that's most of the time. That's kind of how when I'm writing news stories, that's kind of how it goes. Try to do a couple interviews, do kind of a first one, get the lay of the land, and then come back with sort of some specific questions and whatever. Sort of once I understand what's going on, right? Because oftentimes the lead will be, "Hey, this sounds interesting. See if this goes anywhere."
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Whether it's my editor, or sometimes I'll see something interesting and then say, "Hey, is this something that would be of interest to the banner?" Right? So, and then usually there's a kind of a shorter interview to start off with, and then a longer interview. Once we kind of know what direction we want to go. So.
Cool. Do you do it from memory or do you record it or what works for
Often,
you? I know different people do different things.
I have recorded some interviews. Some people don't necessarily like being recorded for interviews, so I have
True.
recorded some. It sort of depends if people are open to that. Otherwise, I'll sit there on the phone and just have my pencil and my note sheet going and do it that way. Sometimes some people don't like to even talk on the phone, so we do question and answers via email instead.
Uh,
Sometimes that's nice too, because then the quotes are a little bit easier that way.
yeah.
But yeah, so it just sort of depends on
Yeah.
what people are sort of comfortable with, right?
Cool. I'd never really done that. I tried to do one interview thing and I had like a phone recorder thing, but I told the guy at front, this is like, I'm recording this and is that okay with you? And he said, sure. And it was for a medical taxi service that is a for-profit business, but they actually get a lot of donations during COVID. There was like a bunch of people donating money to help other people get around, which was really nice. And it was called Heart and Soul, which I liked. And it was a great interview. Only the problem was after I was looking at the transcript, I'm like, there's so many R's. and,
Mm.
and it's like, how do I piece this together into like a coherent sentence here? Because the way I talk normally, this is, I'm like, this, how do you weave this? And you just kind of take creative license, but try to keep the spirit of what they were saying.
Yeah.
So I wondered if you ever had that challenge.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So let's see. Um, going with the things. All right. So, do you have any personal writing projects that you're working on or towards?
Not officially. I mean, I've got lots of stuff that I've kind of is half written. A lot of shorter, sort of blog style format stuff.
Mhm.
There's always, I guess, mentioned before, there's always lots of thoughts that are percolating in my head. So
Yeah.
there's lots of stuff that's kind of half done or sort of done and not sure what to do with it.
Mm.
I've got lots of stuff like that I've written it and I was like, oh, I'm not sure what this actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, at this point, I'm not sure. I don't know. I mean, I like to write, and then, what it turns into after that, I'm not really sure.
Yeah. Sometimes I have several blog posts that are like stream of consciousness kind of thing, and I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just gonna write.
Yeah.
And then I struggle with, like I'm working on a piece for my other channel, that's personal channel. So I actually started 2 channels, Writers in Meaning and then Nora Fellowship. And I'm trying to work on the next video and talking about wisdom. And
Okay.
I'm like it's a big topic, and I'm like, I don't think I have anything new to share with anybody, but I'm going to write about it anyhow. And I'm like, I have a couple parts where I'm like, I have to actually do some research and figure some stuff out. And I'm like, I don't know if I should cut this into 2 pieces or what. And so, yeah, it's just like, it kind of morphs as time goes on. It's like, but yeah, so, but do you have a website or for yourself?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. All right. I want to make sure I promote you properly. So,
Yeah, no. Most of my writings either been in the banner or for other various industry magazines. I haven't done a whole lot of stuff on my own yet. So
okay. You don't have to. It's like everybody's different. I know some writers who just do it for personal enjoyment.
yeah,
Josh, there's 3 main guys of us. There's Josh, Jordan, and I. And Josh is the one who started the writers group on the Discord server. And he just writes because he likes to. And he also writes for his church, for their blog on their website. And he comes up with really interesting stuff. And then Jordan is a professional writer. He has, I think, a self-published book and one online that people can read if they want to. And so I interviewed them in the last video. So this is kind of the next video. I'm going to be doing a series of videos of all the different participants with the project, the Anthology project, because you all have very interesting things to say and do, and you come from a wide variety of backgrounds.
Yeah, there you
go. So do you just mostly like write nonfiction? Do you ever write fiction or?
I haven't gone into fiction at all. Yeah, I know that part's not really interesting. Hasn't really interested me. I like sharing, what thing that, I found is I like sharing what other people are up to.
That's cool.
Yeah, I kind of like, so every time you kind of hear about something, it's like, oh, that's interesting. And, maybe there's other people that would like to hear about that or so.
Yeah, that's really neat. That's really cool. I have a couple of technical questions because I'm a nerdy writer and I have to ask.
All right. Yeah, sure.
But these are not like profound things. They're just like curious. So my dad was an actor, writer, director, and he was not a good typist. He actually poked with 2 fingers when he had the type. But my mom was his writing partner, and she could type, and she understood the script software. He mostly wrote screenplays, audio video scripts, radio promos, that kind of stuff. But he had a legal pad. He liked the yellow legal pad. You could do white sometimes, that would be okay. But he liked the yellow one. I think it was with the contrast. And he would handwrite it. And then my mom would type it up. And of course, my mom would have to ask him, like, what this word was. And just, what? You can't use until he would joke back and forth with her. But sometimes she'd be able to decipher his doctor's handwriting sometimes and go up. Sometimes if you run out of room, he would go up on the curve, on the margin.
Nice.
So I tend to do a mix of both. I like writing by hand, but I type it up. And then sometimes I just sit at my computer and I type. And so I'm like, I can do both. But for me, sometimes just being able to think by writing with my actual hand helps. What works for you?
A mix of both. Like I said, if I'm interviewing someone and I've got, I'm taking notes by hand, then I do enjoy that a little bit. But I've got, I'm also cursed with, handwriting good enough to be a doctor. So sometimes that's a little bit of a struggle, when you go back, the next day, you're like, what is this again? But sometimes just sitting in front of a blank screen and typing away is also very cathartic. So
So what you tend to like sharing what other people do. And what do you notice a pattern? I know that you mostly wrote from agriculture, because that's what you're based out of, but do you notice a pattern of like the stories that mean the most to you, whether it's about charity or it's about truth or it's about different whatever the theme or the essence of it. Do you
Yeah.
tend to notice a
Um,
pattern?
I mean, the stories that I really like doing is when I can find, whether it's churches or people or organizations that are helping others in a unique way.
Oh,
Um,
cool.
so, like, one of the things that I find very interesting is at our local church, our pastors sort of challenged the congregation, and said, at some point, if our church sort of if the city, said, "Hey, we're gonna take your land and we're gonna pave it all, and we're gonna put up a McDonald's," right?
Yeah.
Would the community care that that happened,
Mm,
or would they all just line up for the drive-through for the coffee in the morning and move on, right? Like,
right.
would
Yeah.
there if we weren't there, would anybody really notice, right? And if
Mm,
people aren't going to notice, then we've kind of missed the mark, right?
right.
Um, you know, I remember at one point in 2021, there was like 2021. Anyways, there was a significant flood in our area, and so our church was kind of doing a bunch of relief efforts and stuff like that. We had a bunch of our church members were affected by this, and at one point we had people, we had sort of like a food bank type set up in our basement for people who were affected by the flood. And then we also run a extreme weather shelter. So we have homeless people sleeping in the gym, in our church
Mm,
gym, during the winter when it's
mm,
cold or there's inclement weather. So we
mm,
had that happening upstairs. We had another program called Starfish Backpacks. They basically provide food through the school district, so kids get backpacks sort of full of food. These are kids that would like use the lunch programs and stuff at their school, and then this
mm,
organization comes in and says, okay, well, these kids get looked after while they're at school. But what happens sort of Friday night to Monday morning?
mm,
So then they make sure that on Fridays these kids get backpacks with food to kind of make it through the weekend.
mm,
So they were doing their thing in another part of the church, and then the local community services was also using another part of the church to build Christmas hampers. Um, so I remember kind of sitting in our church basement at one point and just kind of just in awe of all the sort of stuff that was happening, and kind of realizing that sort of this is what at some point this is kind of what it's all about, right?
mm,
Um, so so being able to share some of those types of stories, right, about
mm.
just people or organizations that are helping people in unique ways, and sort of meeting a need in a unique or different way, I guess.
Yeah. There's so people who might be watching or listening may not be familiar with church or not or synagogues or anything like that. Um, they may not understand the breadth and scope and depth of how much charity work churches usually do, of just the simple things that you talked about. I know in my town, there's a lot of different churches that do similar kind of things, and they, you know, when my dad passed away, we were kind of in hard straits, and we needed to rely on some of those charity activities to help pay the bills and stuff.
Yeah,
And we were very thankful for them. And it, you know, what when you were talking, it made me think of Gandalf's famous line. It's some people believe that the only way you can hold darkness at bay is with great power, but I believe something like this effect. I'm not quoting it perfectly. Somebody can put it in the comments. But basically, I believe that it's the small little things that regular people do every day that keep the darkness at bay.
Yeah.
And so all these little churches, all little to mega churches that do all these different programs to minister to the needs of the members as well as the community that they happen to be in.
Yeah.
They do a lot of good work that goes unseen and underreported. So it's really fantastic that you try to bring light to what people are doing in regular everyday life. There's a lot of interesting stuff, and people could check out the banner and see, your articles as well as the banner's articles of like what's going on in just one denomination.
Yeah.
This is not like, I don't know how many denominations there are. I'm not sure if there's hundreds or thousands. I don't know, but it's kind of encouraging. It's like when the news media tells us all this bad stuff is going on, and okay, it's good to know the bad stuff so we know about it. But the good gets underreported. So it's really heartening that you figured out what's going on and let us know about it.
Yeah.
So, let me see if I had any other questions. Well, I think we could wrap this up. Do you have any final thoughts or words to share with me and or the audience about the project or, the banner, or just your perspective and experience in writing? And, one of the things that we say on the website is pursue meaning. Don't just do what's expedient. Pursue meaning, and serving others and reporting the good does that. But I'm interested to hear your thoughts, not to put you on the spot. Sorry.
No, I think one of the things that I've learned through this is that there's everybody sort of has a story or has something to share, and it took me a while to sort of find my voice, I guess, in that. And so I would just encourage people to find their voice or their outlet to sort of share their story, whether that's with a larger audience through journalism, or whether that's just sharing it with somebody personally. But I think that there's great value in sort of being able to share your story and sort of share some of the thoughts that you might have about things. And one of the things that does is it allows you learn pretty quick that not all the thoughts running through your head are nuggets of gold. Maybe there's a few rattling around in there, but they're not all nuggets of gold, right? And so that was, that's a little humbling at first, but that's also like something great to sort of experience, that some thought that you had that you thought was so great, it might not be that great, or it might not be that original, or whatever, right? Like there's but getting out there and sort of putting your thoughts out there, sharing your thoughts and stories with whether that's an individual or a broader audience, I think is always it's important, because it helps you figure out more. It's very challenging, because it definitely, having your views and your thoughts sort of out there leaves you open to question. So then it does force you to sort of think a little bit deeper than the surface, and why do I think this way? And it spurs a bunch more questions when you kind of put yourself out there. So
one of the things which you may or may not be aware of, I think you kind of touched on this in the article, is that the Bridge of the Meaning community, they're founded on having good faith dialogue with people that are from different walks of life, and questioning not only each other but also our own stuff, and steel manning each other at the same time. And it's like, okay, do you think this? Maybe this is why you think this. Da, 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 da. And then, oh, okay, well, I wasn't thinking that, but that makes sense. It's like
Yeah.
being honest about it.
Yeah.
What came to my mind when you were saying all that wonderful stuff was, I think it was Brene Brown who said something like, or somebody else like her, said something to the effect that if you want people to respect you, show them strength. If you want people to connect with you, be vulnerable. And sharing your story can be part of being vulnerable and like opening yourself up to criticism, as well as, you know, it's kind of like, for a writer, it's kind of, you're sharing stuff when not everybody's going to agree. And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, oh yeah, okay. But to be bold, to be brave, and to care, and and share. So, thank you very, very much, Dan, for joining us. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. For more information on what we talked about and the Writers of Meaning Anthology project, check out the video description below. Thank you for watching. Remember, don't just do what's expedient, dig deeper, and pursue meaning in your writing and in your life. Thank you.